All right. So, hello, my name is Kit. I am a 22-year-old non-binary person. I am asexual, and I am also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church.
So, I mean, that allows our listeners to understand kind of a little bit of background that you actually do have a platform to talk about Mormonism, whereas me, who grew up Catholic and then left the church, and then now I go to a Pentecostal church slash non-denominational, like I don't really have a lot of background on Mormonism. So at the start of our discussion, hang on, I should mute my phone. We'll cut that out. At the start of our discussion, we talked about the YouTube video that I did, which was back in the day, and I was on this kick of trying to do kind of an introduction, or not introduction, more of a, I guess, history of different faiths and denominations and what that means and what they were about. And I found a book, and I should have been more prepared, but I cannot remember the name of the book, but it was a if you're familiar with LibreVox, it's like the free open source
Yeah,
books that are no longer in like copyright or whatever.
yeah, I'm familiar with LibriVox.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I listened to that, and it was basically trying to tell the history of Mormonism. And I thought, oh, this is great. We can talk about it. And turns out that it was like 99% wrong.
Well, there was parts of it that were correct, and I actually did a little bit of research
Yeah.
on that book, and it was actually written by someone who was a member for a long time
Hmm.
in it, but there was like little pieces that weren't exactly quite right. And I don't know why exactly they weren't right, but
Yeah.
considering it was written by someone who was a member when they were alive,
Yeah.
but there was some parts that I think could definitely have been cleared up better or
Mhm.
something like that. But
Yeah, I think especially for somebody who has no experience with it coming in, and if some, like for instance with Catholicism, if somebody who had no experience with Catholicism came in, they'll see that we, well, I say we, I don't really practice anymore, but when growing up, there would be a lot of statues of saints and stuff around the church, and people thought that Catholics prayed to these statues. And it's like, no, think of it more of like you've got a photo of a deceased family member. You're not praying or worshiping them, that you're just, hey, they're a family member and they mean a lot to us, so we want to have an image representing that family member.
you're just
And
honoring them.
yeah, honoring, yes. And that's something from an outsider's perspective that's just really weird. And unless you are in it, and it's not the same, but if you try to explain it to somebody that isn't Catholic, then it can sometimes come off differently, because I mean, you've got your entire life that you grew up in it, it's just normal to you, whereas somebody looking inward, they're like, that's still really weird. um,
Yeah.
so I kind of feel, in a sense of Mormonism, it's we'll get into it, but the aspects of the discs or plates, that's the thing that just is very confusing to me, I think. So I guess we can just start with like how it all started, like what's the history behind it, and if you want to talk about it, and I can ask questions, and then kind of go from there.
All right. So really, it begins in with the New Testament,
Hmm.
and like you said in your video, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we do believe in the Bible, and and so the belief that we have is that after the all of the apostles were either killed or banished or exiled,
Hmm.
um, the authority to act as the savior was taken away from the earth because there wasn't really anyone worthy to hold that power.
Okay.
Mm. And so, not to say that there weren't other people that were inspired by the power of God, such as like Martin Luther and John Calvin and stuff, the reformers, but they didn't have the proper authority as given from God. And so uh, in in your video you mentioned Joseph Smith,
Hmm.
and he was a young man living in New York, in the state of New York, and there was, as you said, kind of a religious is kind of a battle of opinions, I guess.
Yeah,
To
like
see,
yeah. What was it between like the Methodists and
it was between all sorts of denominations.
everybody?
Like they were all interpreting the Bible in different ways and trying to figure out and like trying to figure out who was right. And it was definitely in that region of the United States. And so in I want to wait. Let me think. It was 1819.
Mhm.
Joseph Smith was reading in the Bible, and he came across a verse that really spoke to him. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, I'll just
Sure.
read from it. So I'm just reading from the King James Version.
Okay.
If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. And that's James chapter 1, verse 5.
Okay.
And so Joseph Smith read that verse, and it spoke really powerfully to him. The Holy Spirit just spoke to him powerfully, saying that he needed to act on that. And so in 1820, he went into a grove of trees is near his home, and began to pray,
Hmm.
asking and just seeking an answer in faith, hoping that he would get an answer to which church was true, because he was just very confused about how the same passage of scripture could be interpreted so differently.
Yeah.
And so, as an answer to that prayer, God the Father and Jesus Christ actually appeared to him in vision, and God the Father addressed him by name and said, "Joseph, this is my beloved son, and hear him."
Hmm.
And so, and Jesus spoke directly to Joseph Smith and explained to him that none of the churches that were on the earth at the time had the full truth, and none of them had the full authority you to be the same church that Christ had set up while he was on the earth.
Hmm.
And and Joseph Smith was also told that the truth would be of things would be made known unto him at a later time. And then a few years later, Joseph Smith was yeah. So Joseph Smith was a farmer, like you said in your video,
Hmm.
and I've actually been to a replica of his family's farm in New York,
Oh, cool.
and so I've actually been to that grove of trees, and so a few years after the vision from God the Father and Jesus Christ, he had another vision of an angel who, in that vision, he was told that there was a work for him to do,
Hmm.
and eventually, and so the person who visited Joseph Smith was a person from ancient America uh, who was able to eventually give Joseph Smith the golden plates to translate into the Book of Mormon,
Hmm.
in which is another record and that is used as scripture for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and is about to and it's an ancient record kept by prophets that lived in the Americas,
Mm-hmm.
and takes place from about 600 BC, starting in Jerusalem, until about AD 421, when the last person that is a descendant of those first people to come to the Americas from that time period. And when that last person, who was the person who Joseph Smith saw in vision, buried the record in a hill that was nearby Joseph Smith's home.
Okay. So I guess my question with that is, like, you mentioned that I'm looking at my notes. You mentioned that the discs came as it was a record of a family prophets that lived in the Americas before Joseph Smith.
Yes.
And was that in the notes I have that there was a family that actually left Jerusalem and traveled to the Americas, and that they were kind of like the first prophets or family.
Yes. So the family, yeah, the patriarch of the family, his name was Lehi, and he was a prophet living in Jerusalem
Okay.
in right around the reign of King Zedekiah, which is referenced in I don't remember where it's referenced
That's
in
fine.
the Bible, but during King Zedekiah's reign in 600 BC, Lehi was a prophet of God, as well as with Jeremiah about the same time as that. And so God told Lehi to leave with his family into the wilderness, and eventually they got to a safe spot, but God told them that it wasn't their promised land of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of Lehi's sons, who's named Nephi, built a ship, and everybody got on board the ship with supplies for plant, like seeds and animals and such,
Mm-hmm.
and they sailed over to what is believed to be near southern Mexico.
Hmm.
You know, and then not too long after that, Lehi passed away, and Nephi became a prophet, but his older brothers, Laman and I don't remember the other one off the top of my
I
head.
think you said Nephi, or no,
Yeah,
Nephi
it's
was the other
pronounced
one.
Nephi.
Okay.
And so uh, uh, Nephi's older brother Laman was was very against the teachings of the Lord, and
Mm-hmm.
so they split off, and their own families kind of didn't really disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and their and their descendants didn't really agree either.
Mm-hmm.
So they were divided amongst themselves, and there was definitely a lot of wars in between in the groups. But
Cool. So, like, I guess this is like going to go on to more of completely misunderstood parts of Mormonism, because there's a lot of people that talk about when I first came back to the Christian faith after I left Catholicism, it was years, and then I came back to the Christian faith. Well, I had questions about different denominations, because there are so many different Christian denominations, which I think that's probably something that Joseph Smith saw, is like they're breaking off from each other, and it's chaos to some degree. And so I asked questions about, okay, well, what does this denomination have that this denomination doesn't believe, and what are the differences? And somebody told me that Mormonism believes, this is not trying to offend, this is just literally, this is what I've heard, believes in aliens. Like, I don't even know where that came from.
I
I've
have
never,
never
yeah.
heard such a thing myself about that, actually.
I've heard this more than once, and I don't know where it's coming from. I think the fact of the plates has something to do with it, in the sense of saying that God and Jesus came. Honestly, I don't know. But they're saying, yeah, they believe that if once you die, you somehow become a god of your own universe and all
Well, that
this.
is part of the belief system,
Okay.
actually.
Would you want to go into that a little bit?
So basically, the idea of it is that uh, after death,
Hmm.
uh, uh, there is a sort of a state of in between. So there is an in between state,
Hmm.
which is kind of like the traditional idea of heaven and hell, kind of.
Okay. Kind of like in Catholicism, there's oh my goodness, my brain just died. Um, good Lord. Oh my goodness, my brain. It's basically if you die and before you go to hell or heaven, it's kind of a state of that in between that. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna have all the Catholics in the comments say, "How dare you?" Is that kind of like it's like this? You're not quite in
Sort
hell,
of.
not quite in heaven.
Well, not exactly. So that's mostly just like a place for those who weren't alive. So the ones that are in the traditional idea of hell are able to be taught the truth
Hmm.
with by like living a good life, you're able to enter the state of a little bit of a state of rest,
Yeah.
but you're able to teach those who weren't able to get the truth, or what we believe to be the truth at least. And so uh, and then after that, with the end of times and the apocalypse and all that,
Hmm.
and there is everybody will be relieved from that state and will be able to enter into a degree of glory based off of their how like what they were like on Earth
Okay.
and how they how they I guess acted in like Christ and such and I'm not too familiar with like all of the information that
That's fine.
because is I even though I've been a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints my whole life, I still have a lot that I could learn.
Yeah, I think that's everybody.
But there is sort of like the degrees of glory, eh, which are like more of a final uh, um, final judgment of sorts, I
Hmm.
guess. And those found to be in the highest degree of glory you, are believed to be able to become gods and create their own worlds. Although, of course, I have no complete evidence of that.
Cool. Okay. So it almost sounds maybe not worlds, maybe, well, I mean, you can call it worlds, but it almost sounds like create your own heavens in a sense. Or is it?
Maybe I'm really not
No,
sure.
no. And I figured out the word that I was looking for. It's purgatory.
Oh,
Yeah, which that sounds different. So, like when you said about when people pass away, is it almost like they're in like a state of sleep? Is that what?
it's kind of like a limbo sort of state. That's
Okay.
like their body is dead, but their spirit is alive.
Okay. Do you believe? Well, I don't know if the church believes this or not. Like, do they have a sense of consciousness? Is it just darkness, or is it just kind of dreamlike? I mean, I guess nobody really knows for sure.
Yeah, no one really knows for sure. I personally think that there is definitely like a consciousness
Hmm.
because I I've sometimes felt the influence like had a really strong feeling of like my great great grandpa is watching over me or something like
Hmm.
that, sort of like a guardian angel of sorts, but it's not exactly that. It's just like a calming presence of just like you know, this person
With you.
is helping me feel better about what's going on or something like that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. There's some denominations that believe that people cannot come back and comfort their loved ones and stuff like that, but I tend to believe that they can because in the Bible it talks about humans being like angels, you know, in the fact of they have quite a bit of authority because I mean with the spirit and everything it is God's breathed life into you, or at least that's what we believe. And I personally think that a person's spirit has strength to come back and be with a person, or not necessarily be an angel to the person, but at least have that connection to them, look out for them, and kind of keep tabs on them a
Yeah,
little bit. So
yeah, I definitely believe that.
yeah,
Same sort of thing.
cool. So basically what you're saying is Mormonism is not too different from regular Christianity in the fact of your basis always will come from the Bible. You guys will always hold the Bible to its high authority. It's just you have evidence that there is a continuation of that book.
Yeah, so the main thing is that, and being a Mormon, it's the belief that and we have the same sort of organization of the church as Jesus Christ organized when he was on the earth,
Mm-hmm.
and then some. So
Yeah.
we have additional insight, like as I said in the notes, the other sheep that are mentioned in the book of Saint John are the people in the Americas, and that and, and there's like we're just like adding to it's just adding to the information that's already in there in the Bible.
Okay. No, I can understand that. Yeah, I'm looking at your notes. I think you said John chapter 10 verse 16 where he talks about the other sheep.
Yeah.
I think some people say, well, that they're just talking about the Gentiles, but I mean, well, technically Mormonism is Gentiles in a sense. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
is. So, so I mean, I can see where that's coming from. And I think your notes said the record ends in about AD 421.
Yes.
And that was the last person found worthy to hold the record that was buried
Yeah.
in the hill.
Yeah, and that record became the Book of Mormon.
Okay. So like was it in another link? So you mentioned about decoding something. Was the discs were they a different language or?
Yeah, so the golden plates were a grouping of the records that were kept by the ancient people, mostly by the ancient prophets,
Mm-hmm.
Starting with Lehi from 600 BC to AD 421. And they were all compiled by a man whose name was Mormon, which is where
Oh,
the
okay,
nickname
cool.
of Mormons comes from. And so he compiled those all together throughout his life because they had been recorded all throughout about 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one who compiled them all together, and he transcribed all of them into an ancient form of Egyptian.
Okay.
And so they were like individual metal plates with engravings on them.
Like hieroglyphics and stuff.
Not quite hieroglyphics, but sort of there.
More symbols and
More just like an ancient script system that has been revealed to be similar to ancient Egyptian that wasn't like it was more more commonly used than
okay,
hieroglyphics. Like
that makes sense.
The common scribe back then would use.
Okay, cool.
And so Joseph Smith was able to find those through divine guidance, and he was given the power from God to translate them into English. And since being translated into English, it's also been translated into dozens of other languages.
Yeah, right. So I guess my next question is, you mentioned about how the record ends in AD 421. So that means that they were there a lot longer than that. So essentially they were there before, like, the whole Christopher Columbus thing. They were there. They were the first non-Native American people to go over.
Well, many people believe that one of the groups of people that broke away from Lehi's family are ancestors to the modern day Native Americans.
Oh, okay. That would make sense because people that came from Jerusalem were Middle Eastern and had more of a darker complexion, and Native Americans, they are more darker complected versus the Europeans that come over afterwards too.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm just following along. So I mean
Yeah.
that kind of explains a lot because I'll be honest, there is just so much misinformation that honestly thought that the book that I used was like, oh yeah, this is awesome because this is just going to explain so much, but in comparison to what I read versus your history and everything that you're telling me, I can see where those inconsistencies were, and the plates and all of that was just that was something that I was struggling to grapple with. So where did these plates come from? Um, why were they there? Where did who are all of these people that would have done it? Because the way the book made it sound and the way some other people have made it sound in regards to rumors and talks is that uh, they just magically appeared, and it sounds like there's a much deeper history with it than the way that it's been I guess explained to the wider
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I appreciate you coming on and talking with me because this definitely clears up a lot of misunderstanding that I had in regards to that video. And if people want, they can go back and watch the video and then listen to this one so that they can kind of get a better grasp of the inconsistencies there because there's a lot. But I guess we can end it now. That kind of explained everything, and we will have this podcast out. It'll be a bit. We're recording
Yeah.
on May 13th, but we've got another 6-part series that's ahead of us, and then we've got a couple other episodes. So it'll come out
Yeah.
eventually, and we'll probably put the video on YouTube, and the audio we'll have on our normal platform. And if you're doing any other special projects, feel free to call them out. And other than that, we can go ahead and end the podcast here.
I I think I'm good.
All right. Thanks for joining.
All
And
right.
then at that point, I would cut.
Yep. All right.
I love the joy of being able to go back and edit, and because when I do podcasts on my own, I tend to ramble really, really bad.
I noticed that a little bit
Yeah.
when I was
And
listening
so, like, if you
to
go
other
back to the
episodes.
beginning of the podcast, it's like really bad, and then it slowly starts to get more.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm still
Yeah.
learning. This is like the first real podcast that I've done, and just trying to learn what I need to change. And I listen to the podcasts, and I say so way too much, and I'm trying to refocus that and not do it just because it drives me crazy. But I'm learning, and it'll get better. But I appreciate you coming on, and I guess I can let you go unless you have any questions for me.
I just wanted to say thanks because I've like always wanted to be on a podcast, but like I wouldn't know what to talk about if I were just to set one up myself. So it's just nice to be sort of like just a guest on a podcast. So,
Yeah, and honestly, you're welcome to come back because, like, if you ever want to talk about your personal journey, you can do that. Or if there's like a particular topic that you are interested in, I'd totally be up for having you back, just like a guest spot or whatever. Because I had a lot of fun. I'm a huge like history buff in the sense of learning context and where stuff came from and where ideas came from. And I
yeah.
feel like having another voice, because a lot of the topics I cover on the podcast could be considered, I guess, non-denominational style, versus I think having people from different denominations would be really, really cool, because you can get different viewpoints, and it's okay if both parties don't completely agree, but being able to have that discussion to understand and have that representation for other people, I think would be important, because I know there's probably several LGBTQ plus people that are in the Mormon faith.
There's actually
Oh, really?
not really. I am one of 3 that I know in
Oh,
person.
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Probably online, I guess.
Okay. Well, actually, they were actually in before all this quarantine and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, one of them, uh, he's actually in my congregation and
Hmm.
with his family, and he's like in high school though, I think,
Hmm.
and he's transgender. And then the other one, she was also in my congregation, and she's closer to my age, but she moved out of her parents' house and is living in Oregon. But I'm still in pretty good contact with her.
Oh, that's cool.
I don't know how much she practices nowadays, but
Hmm.
yeah.
I'd say it's hard. Well, I don't know your particular church, but I've heard people that are. There is a podcast. I think it's like Ex Mormon or something like that. I don't remember um, what it's called, but they talk about how they were gay or whatever in the Mormon church and how it was just really, really bad. They would try to go through the conversion therapy. They would kind of just every horror story that any other Christian denomination has that's super, super homophobic. They got kicked out of their home. They were considered sinner, just all this horrible things that happened. And I don't remember if you mentioned that your church, you don't really know how they would act. Was that you that mentioned that, or?
Um, I don't
Wow.
remember if I did or not.
Is your church okay, or is it more of just a don't ask, don't tell kind of situation?
It's kind of a don't ask, don't tell
Okay, yeah.
because I found out. So the girl I know that I'm friends with, uh, I only found out that she was transgender because her mom and my mom are really good friends,
Hmm.
and her mom told my mom, and my mom was just like, "Hey, just so you know,
Oh no.
and I'm just like, and this was even before I even knew I was asexual, which happened like just a few years ago, and
Okay.
so, but I was just like, okay, it doesn't matter to
Thanks, I
me. She's
guess.
still my friend,
Well,
um, but like, I, I honestly really, I'm only really yeah, I've only really come out to like a very few select people because it's just like that sort of stigma people have. And
yeah.
it's just like it's hard.
I wonder if they would react better given your asexual status versus.
Yeah, well, the thing is, when I told my parents that I was asexual, they were just like, "Oh yeah, that's totally fine. We don't really
You don't
care
even care, whatever. Yeah.
that much." But it's just like, because it's just like, oh, I guess we don't have to worry that and you're gonna
Go
you're
off and
gonna
do
have
stuff.
sex
Stuff.
outside of
Yeah.
marriage or something, and it's just like
It's like, I
okay,
guess. It's
but
almost like the celibate thing in a lot of churches. They say that gay people
yeah,
need to be celibate. I would imagine they would probably have more issues with the non-binary aspect of
they
things.
definitely do. Yeah, they definitely do. I've been trying to talk with my mom about it, but just because of who she is, she's very logical. I guess is the best way to put it. Like
Everything's black and white.
yeah, she can understand how someone might be being trans, but she doesn't fully like understand completely because to her like if you're born a certain way, eh, then you are that and but like she understands that sometimes things can be different for people, but with her, it's just like eh, there's male and there's female and there's like there's not really an intersection between them. Like
I wonder what she would
her
think about actual intersex people.
yeah, that's part of the thing that's just like I wish I could expose her to that, but I don't
Right.
know. I don't want to know. I'm scared of how might take it.
It's like there's literal biological, like you can be like, I want you to Google something for me.
Yeah, yeah,
It's hard, especially having parents. Like my parents, well, I don't have anything to do with my dad, but my my family, my biological family, they are completely accepting. Nobody cares. My grandmother, even my great grandma, she found out I was transitioning like a few years ago after I was already on hormones and stuff. Just because I didn't know what she would do. Because I mean, when you think of a great grandma, you think, oh, they're in a different time period. They may not understand. And she was more hurt that I just didn't tell her. And she recently called me and she was like, yeah, I watched, I think her name is Jasmine. She's the young girl who transitioned to a girl like super, super
Oh,
young, like
oh yeah,
4
I'm
or 5.
Jazz.
Yeah, that one. And she was like, yeah, I watched, and she had and she used the right pronouns the whole time. She's like, yeah, she had her surgery, and she's doing well. She's so pretty. She kept saying that.
Yeah, I've wanted to watch that, but at the same time, it's just like I don't want other people to know that I watch it
Yeah,
because like there's so much of a bubble in the area I live in that like
you'd have to
I wouldn't
watch
have
it.
anyone to talk to with about it.
You can totally, like, on Discord, I'm sure that people would love to watch it. I think that that would be something cool for Chris and I to watch, just because
Because it's
we're
the opposite situation for you
it
guys.
is. It is a complete, but at the same time, having that representation of just somebody trans, period, is really cool. There's not a lot of focus on trans men as much, and I don't know why. But I mean, there's Jazz Bono or Bono, however you say it. But that's not in our generation, I guess. And he transitioned so publicly, which is cool, but there just isn't that, I guess. I watch more YouTubers because you get that
Yeah,
personal aspect of it and you get to see their process. But I think it would be really cool to have like something on TLC or something like that to where it's more of a public um, showcase of it. And I don't know if it's that trans men are less likely to be as open about it or what it is, but um, I would like to see more trans men displayed alongside. I would like to see both
yeah.
representations.
I
Um,
need some representation here though.
right.
But
There, yeah, that is another thing. There's just not a lot of non-binary stuff either. Like I have a friend, they're in, oh Lord, what is the name? They're out. I don't know if you're familiar with Tennessee, but Knoxville is about 2 hours away from us. So they're in Maryville, I think.
I'm a
And
little bit familiar with
okay, cool.
Tennessee. Yeah.
And they are they're a librarian, and they actually transitioned from female to non-binary, but they actually take hormones and pass as male, but they are non-binary and use they them pronouns and all that. But that was like the first non-binary person that I knew. Everybody else, their partner is a trans guy, and he was actually the best man at Chris and I's wedding. And so I just the understanding of non-binary early on, I had no clue. I was like, oh, so this is a thing. And it was really hard to grasp because I had never experienced feeling that kind of outside the box kind of feeling, and well, outside the binary. And so I just sat down and they kind of explained their life and how they feel, and it helped me to grasp that concept. And now, after knowing a person who's non-binary, it feels like I just meet more and more people that are non-binary, or at least maybe
Yeah.
my mind's open to it. There's actually a person in our church that's non-binary. I think 2 people possibly. One, yeah, 2 people, and then one person that's kind of in the process of figuring out their gender. So we actually have a lot of trans umbrella people in our church, surprisingly, especially for a Pentecostal church.
Especially in the South too.
Yeah, that is true. It's like as soon as one church is accepting of a community, it's like all of them just flock there because they know, hey, it's a safe place, and word of mouth in the LGBT community, it spreads pretty fast, especially
Yeah.
in small towns and in the South. But I will probably message you on Discord, and if you decide that you want to do anything further, hit me up. I'd be happy to have you on again, and we can talk more about Mormonism, talk more about whatever you want to talk about. And I will talk to you later, I guess.
Alrighty.
All right. Bye.
Seahawks.